eyes may be able to see, but without a heart, you cannot feel.
What's up, everybody? This is Jorcio C. Samuels, and you are tuning into episode 105 of the It Will Come Show. And today we're going to be looking at the rise of invite-only niche groups and communities. And so let's dive straight into it. Okay, let's pick this up. All right, the rise of small invite-only niche groups. So this episode was actually inspired by a few articles. One of them was actually sent to me via our actual own niche community called The Pack, which is a productivity accelerator, and I'll talk about it a little bit more. But the article on the left. So this article talks about small invite-only amplifier groups. All right, and I'll kind of cover that a little bit more as to what they are and why they're useful, and then how they connect into sort of the power of small niche groups in general. And then over on the right, you have an article that was actually published in December of last year, and it talks about the rise of niche and vertical social networks. And social networks I'll also talk about, and again, tie it into how this actually can be useful or helpful for you in terms of determining what to go and do in regards to, say, personal productivity and leveraging off of these niche groups. Okay, so what I'm going to be chatting about today is, of course, the niche groups and vertical networks, connection to intimacy, quantity to quality, cultural alignment, referral power, retention, and, of course, the future of niche groups, and especially over these next coming years and maybe even decade. Everything happens in cycles. So what are niche communities and vertical networks? So now, apologies for the text on the right here. This actually is text from a previous episode, actually 104, I believe. But essentially, niche communities and vertical networks. Niche communities are small groups that are focused on a particular interest, a particular subject, maybe even a product, but it's just one very small but tightly knit group. Vertical networks tend to be more about looking at a social network, but the same thing, the vertical, right, along an interest line. And so these have definitely been popping up more and more over the years, and I believe this is because we've hit a point where we've been able to connect the world, and now people are seeking more intimacy. So from connection to intimacy. If you've watched previous episodes of mine, I've talked about Facebook quite a bit and how they shifted their mission statement from connecting the world to bringing the world closer together. And this is an important distinction because it also sort of drives and influences the way that they build their product. So as you can see there, making the world more open and connected had one fundamental flaw. It didn't push for any specific positive outcome for more connection. Technically, it could encompass digital voyeurism via the newsfeed, trading in-person friendship for online acquaintanceship, or the filter bubbles and echo spheres or echo chambers that have further polarized the United States. So today, as Facebook approaches 2 billion monthly users, Mark Zuckerberg revealed a new mission statement: to give people the power to build community and bring the world closer together. All right, so the reason, again, for this is that step one was first they needed to connect the world, and then step two was actually how do people meaningfully connect. And these sort of things, we thought we were creating anew, but really we were just adapting what was already there in our physical world for the virtual world, right? So as many may know, more followers, more fans doesn't necessarily bring you more fulfillment or intimacy in your relationships. And over the last couple of decades that the internet has been around, a lot of people have kind of confused connection for intimacy. Right, and I think a lot of people do actually seek more of that intimacy than they do just connecting with a whole bunch of people. From quantity to quality. Okay, so here, this is a tweet from David Spinks, who's the founder of cmxhub.com, and he put out a tweet not too long ago. People are hitting an exhaustion point with toxicity on big social platforms. This will give rise to a massive wave of niche moderated communities in the next year. Right, so hitting along the same points, right, that people essentially, because of the open nature of some of these other wider social platforms, again, people are seeking intimacy. Because this is actually where trust can be built or formed. And at the end of the day, what you want is actually to have a greater sense of trust within the groups or communities that you find yourself in, because this is what actually leads to greater productivity. When there's a lack of trust, there's a breakdown in productivity in general. It's all connected. Cultural alignment. So psychological safety, if you've been watching this show, is an important part in building trust within groups and communities, etc. And it's also something that actually helps you with your own productivity. So if you are struggling on your own, you might not have issues with psychological safety per se, but the reason why you might have wanted to become a lone wolf, if you're referring to some of the, or if you remember some of the previous episodes, if you're suffering from being a lone wolf, it might have been because you didn't have the psychological safety of your previous pack, which may be your team or community, right? So this is why it's so important to sort of find a group or build a group that has very strong psychological safety, so people feel comfortable enough to be themselves, to be able to talk openly, and to be able to interact and engage. And so getting stuff done is about creating a positive organizational culture or team culture, community culture, whatever the group is that you find yourself in. And so this has everything to do with aligning yourself, right, with the culture that you find yourself in or you're seeking to build. And there's a lot of work done on GSDing, right, getting stuff done, but very few people actually take a look at sort of the environmental cultural factor, which has a big part to play in improving productivity. And I put this particular book cover here because it's one that I find very fascinating. It's called The Rule of the Clan, What an Ancient Form of Social Organization Reveals About the Future of Individual Freedom. So it kind of goes back to sort of, our ancient past, right? We often think that because we come up with new discoveries, new findings, that we have to completely discard the way that our ancestors might have done things. But this isn't necessarily true. You think about just human evolution. Our ancestors may have gone through a lot in order to get to the sort of social structures that they had. And we can learn stuff from it. So, when you're talking about teams, communities, you're talking about relationships, you're talking about kinship. And the clan, were very strong forms of social organization back in the day. And I think they may have a comeback, but perhaps in different forms. Referral power. So this is another element that comes into play with small niche groups, is that you can leverage off of the group's referral power in a much more organized manner. So this is taken from that eToro article that I showcased or demonstrated at the beginning of this episode. But here, post of the week. So this guy essentially created this private email group, and what he did was essentially every month he would send out an email telling people about stuff that he's done, provide value for the people that are part of the group, and then he would just ask them to sort of share it around. And by doing so, he increased tenfold sort of the reach of his articles just by utilizing a small group of amplifiers, right? So by doing this, you're working smarter, not harder. Essentially, because with social networks, a lot of the times you're blasting things out, and people may find your work or your content, but actually with small niche groups you can help leverage off of just the power of that group, right? And the very specific ask, you're building trust, etc. Retention. So one of the benefits of small niche groups is that you have higher retention. So the stats that you actually see here is from our own private group called the Pack. And so the Pack, which is a productivity accelerator and community for lone wolf entrepreneurs and professionals, we have around an 86% retention rate or return rate, right? So every round that takes place, on average around 86%, decide to keep coming back, all right? And so this is pretty crazy because this is over 5 years. And I would say the actual stats is probably around 81.2, because from the time that this survey is done at the end of a round, some time may lapse and life happens, so we probably lose around maybe 5% of the people who indicate that yes, they do want to return. So around 81% is probably more accurate of how many people usually come back to join our accelerator. Right, and so what this has meant is that we haven't had to spend too much time on sales and marketing per round, because people keep coming back. we have a very high level of referral power here, but we still intentionally have kept things small. Now, in the next phase of the pack, we're going to be looking at how we can scale, but for us, one thing we do not want to compromise is sort of that level of intimacy, right, that we have built up over time. And so we've been very careful and discerning with how we go about this, because we have something that's worked really well. And I think sometimes when we focus, too much on scale, you sacrifice these sort of long-term relationships just so that you can get more numbers. And it's all about taking a look at what numbers actually matter, right? All right, and so just to, I guess, look at the future, we spoke about that eToro article, and sort of the benefits by having small niche groups. You actually can save yourself a lot of time. If you look at even nations, right, and their ability to respond to things, small agile movements, Singapore being an example, is a country that was able to respond very quickly to the coronavirus when it started to hit, right? Whereas compared to many larger nations, they have a hard time being able to react or respond to things because there's more people, right, to manage, and more people to try and convince of things, right? So, having large versus small, neither is good or bad. It's just there's certain circumstances and certain cultures, or maybe even certain businesses that actually just benefit off of having, like a small Navy SEAL-like team, maybe the Spartans, etc. And down below, the potential amplifiers, spoke about that from that eToro article. But examples, so there are a few networks that are popping up that operate in this sort of vertical network arena, and some of them come from the blockchain space. One that actually popped up last week is Palping. So if you haven't heard of it or checked it out, I highly recommend you do. Just go to palping.com. It's leveraging blockchain in the background to do some very interesting things in terms of shifting behaviors, right, in a hopefully positive manner. And so here, of course, you can go in, interact with people, tip, but the most interesting thing is actually how they treat your data and how you're able to sign and protect your own data that you put up. So Palping doesn't necessarily own that content, you do, because every time you write something, it's actually connected to your own personal wallet. All right. And then next we've got another platform called Twitch, which has been around for a good number of months. They also are leveraging blockchain in the background, and they're doing some interesting things whereby if people follow you, they actually have to pay a certain, a small amount in order to follow you. And so there's just a little bit more responsibility and accountability that is tied up here. And it's definitely started out, from a niche group. They are planning to be a social network, an alternative to Twitter. You can probably see that flipped over Twitter bird. And this comes at a good time, considering that we've seen what happened over the last week. If you're tuning in to this episode at a later time, it is July 20th, 2020. And last week, some prominent Twitter accounts actually got hacked, including Elon Musk, Barack Obama, Kanye West, etc. And when I say hacked, it was more social engineering. But essentially, the account details and contents of some of these accounts were given to a devious actor, a bad actor. All right, and so these are just some examples of some niche groups and communities and platforms that sort of support that. And never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Right. Some pretty wise words when it comes to small groups. Thought I'd leave that there for you for today. So what niche groups are you a part of? Which ones are working for you? Which ones are not? Would love to hear. Comment below. Remember to like and subscribe. And as always, let's see if we can get back here. Aha! As always, remember, through patience and persistence, it will come.
The eyes may be able to see, but without a heart, you cannot.